eviction will likely be a big problem in this area moving forward.
However, I think there is a lot to be said by a judge having some experience.
All right, Cotter, I wanted to address something, and I don't want you to think that I'm playing gotcha or I'm trying to hurt your reputation, but I think it's something that you need to address today. I've heard several people tell me that you are a diehard Steelers fan. How do you want to address that?
My name is Monica Caffaratti, and I'm a local attorney here in Reno, Nevada. I practice family law, and today I'm joined by Lance White, and we are going to be speaking with Cotter Conway, who is running for the Justice of the Peace. And so I will let Lance say a few words. We're going to be co-interviewing, and then we will get right into it and learn a little bit about Cotter. So Lance, would you like to add anything?
Well, only that I'm glad we're doing this because judicial races don't get a lot of attention, period. And secondly, I have had a chance to learn a lot about Cotter, learn a lot about the local races, and learn a lot about the politics that go into these races. So I'm particularly interested, and I appreciate anybody tuning in to learn more about what a judge does and how Cotter, Mr. Conway, would approach the job if he were elected. So thank you for having me. And the sooner we get talking to you, Cotter, I think that the better we're going to be. So I'm going to start you off by asking you the simplest question of all. What are you running for?
So I am running for Justice of the Peace in Reno, Department 2, which was a position originally or was held by Judge Pete Sferrazza before he retired, and he kind of retired right before COVID. And because of obviously the concerns of COVID, the 5 other justices decided not to fill that position and save that money for the county. Because again, we didn't know what was going to be the financial impact. So that was their decision. And that's now back open because it's the voters who make a decision to fill a position. So it's back on the ballot. And that's the position I'm running for.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided to run for that position and what you think that you will bring to that department if you're elected?
Well, the reason I decided to run for this position is over the last 5 or 6 years, I have really been kind of preparing myself for this. I have been a pro tem judge, which is basically a part-time judge that fills in when a judge is on vacation or a judge has other conflicts. For example, I did that yesterday for Judge Hesjeff, where he had a conflict. So they brought me in to do that. I've done that now in 4 different courts, Incline Justice Court, Sparks Municipal Court, Sparks Justice Court, and of course now Reno Justice Court. I also was hired part-time by Reno Justice Court to serve as their court referee. That had started in January, where I handle small claims actions and traffic tickets. So I've really been kind of preparing for this. I believe that the impact that I can have on our community is positive, way I approach cases. I mean, the best example is yesterday I had an eviction, and often judges are kind of limited on what they can do in an eviction. If there's a 7-day notice to quit or pay and you don't pay, you got to get out, and we can issue an eviction order. When I came with this case, I approached both the individuals and convinced them, they wanted to, but I convinced them that settlement was better. So now they're working on a settlement agreement to keep him in so we don't add to our housing crisis that we're having, and the landlord gets their money. So that, I think, is why I feel that I can come in and I can work with people and we can get just decisions or just resolutions to their disputes.
So Cotter, you said you were a pro tem judge. You have judicial experience.
I do have judicial experience in 4 different courts, as well as, of course, as the court referee.
So my question is this, what have you found to be the hardest part about being a judicial officer?
I think I haven't really found it that hard. I mean, other than, obviously you have your initial, when you first do it, a little bit of nerves about, getting on there, but that was back, that's 4 or 5 years ago. I think a lot of it is you have to be open-minded. You've got to know the law, think that's a big one because, you've got to answer these questions. You get strange questions. You don't just get about the case. Sometimes people will ask, I had a guy, was a guy yesterday in traffic court. I'm trying to remember the exact question that he asked, but what it was is he goes, he said, I didn't realize that something about like speed. I said, well, ignorance of the law is no offense. You don't get to sit there and go, oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize that I had, because he felt that you get a big break. And I have to be ready to tell them and talk to the public and talk to the people that appear and be able to answer their questions so that when they walk out of the court and they go, oh, okay, I was listened to, my questions were answered. Even though it might not have been the best result for me, I feel a lot better about it because I at least understand what happened. So I think that's the toughest part is you've got to be willing to engage the public. You've got to be willing to allow them their say. I mean, remember, it's their access to the court. And so that when they walk out, they feel like, okay, I was heard. I was heard by the judge and my case was pled. And that's what I think is most important to the public is that their case is heard, that their concerns are heard.
So you stated that you were talking a little bit about you were doing evictions and some traffic cases. Would that be the majority of the cases that you would be doing as justice of the peace? Or can you just talk a little bit about how that court is run and what cases you'll be hearing if you're
the justice court handles actually a lot of matters. Evictions, as I said, small claims, traffic. They also handle misdemeanors. So anything from simple batteries to DUIs to trespassing to you name the misdemeanor, they handle that. And they handle the preliminary hearings for all felonies and gross misdemeanors. So in other words, they have to look at the case and decide whether or not there's probable cause for the state to continue. And if there is, then they send it up to district court, and the district court handles the trials and things like that. So those are and then we also have just normal civil cases. A person can bring a lawsuit depending on the amount, and that can be heard just as though we're up in the district court, and we do have jury trials for those, as well as of course domestic batteries. Now that's a new law. The other thing that we do, that's been happening over the last couple decades, is specialty courts. So we do treatment courts, and there's 4 that are currently in the Reno Justice Court.
Can you talk a little bit about those 4? I find that very interesting, and how that benefits the public, those specialty courts.
Yeah, let me give you a sort of an overview of how we approach these cases now, because the interesting thing is now there are articles and there is advice and there are experts saying that a judge should be trauma informed. And that's because 96% of women that have come before the court for sentencing and 89% of men have suffered some form of trauma, usually in childhood. So we're talking about sexual assault, physical abuse, but trauma can also come from suffering from an illness, a cancer survivor, losing a parent, being abandoned by a parent, things like this. And then when you get into adulthood, there's trauma. We talk about veterans and the trauma that they have suffered. And that's why we have veterans courts, not in Reno Justice Court, but in in Reno Municipal Court and in the district court. So we have to be looking at that, because if we're not, then we're not dealing with recidivism. So the importance of the specialty courts is the fact that it's an effort to reduce recidivism. If we just punish people like we did 30 years ago, or hey, you did a crime, go do 30 days in jail, go do probation, those people might very well come back within the system, and we've seen them come back into the system because we didn't address the trauma, we didn't address the underlying issues that lead to criminal behavior. So the big purpose of specialty courts is to deal with recidivism, to treat these people for what's going on with them so they don't commit crime again. And so the Reno Justice Court, like I said, has 4. They have the sort of an adult court that they do for treatment for drug and alcohol treatment. They have the GT court, which is the lower court for that, for young people like 18 to 25. They also have the community court where people do community service to earn their way off. And then there is a DUI court. So that's the high offenders of DUI. We try to treat them before that becomes a felony, and they find themselves in district court.
So Cotter, let me go back to something I asked earlier about the worst part about being a judge. Just so people understand, is there is no special training you need before you become a judge, is there?
There's not. However, I will note that you talk about places like the National Judicial College up at UNR. There is training. Judges do go through training, usually after they become a judge. However, I think there is a lot to be said by a judge having some experience in the judicial area, whether it be as a judge pro tem, whether it be as I did, where I was able to obtain a job as the court referee, whether it's clerking. I think so there's a lot of people who have clerked with a judge and have that. So I think those types of experiences certainly help help someone who is seeking a judgeship.
With your experience, Cotter, do you think there's going to be a lot of time necessary for you to play catch up?
No, I do not believe that. I've been able to jump, like, for example, I came in on these evictions only within the last few weeks. I've done a number of evictions. And I was lucky to have, that's the other thing in this court, because we have 5 other justices, we have those justices to give advice. And so, Judge Herschef helped me out by handing me like AB 486, for example, which is the helps tenants get rent assistance so that they aren't evicted. And so, I had to study that, but I looked at it, was able to take the bench, and I've handled, I think, 8 or 9 of them so far. And, I think I was comfortable up on the bench because I've been on the bench on and off as a judge pro tem for the last 4 or 5 years.
You talked about the one case that you had yesterday with the eviction where you were able to facilitate a settlement between the parties. Is that typical? And are both parties usually willing to enter into settlement? And how will you use that if you're elected to your approach to that, given that eviction will likely be a big problem in this area moving forward?
And I think it will, and it's going to become a bigger problem because AB 46 will expire in 2023. And right now, the funding's all gone. So even if people are applying, there's no money to give them. So that creates a problem. So I think the approach I took, which is more natural for me anyway, is to walk in. I walked in and I tried to get the numbers. What are we talking about? It ended up being, I think, about $500. So it wasn't really a huge number. And so I right there started to kind of talk to the parties about, is there a way that we can resolve this short of eviction? And I even pointed out, I go, because if you as the landlord say, nope, I want him out, I got to sign the eviction order. I have no discretion because he didn't have any funding. He wasn't eligible for any. So I was more interested to see, is there an alternative? But the alternative really rested with the people, with the landlord and the tenant. So that's kind of the approach I take. It's kind of how I approach things throughout my life, is I like to kind of come in and go, okay, what's this? I got your side of the story. I got your side of the story. Isn't there somewhere in the middle that we can meet or something? And both parties in the end agreed. They said that there were, it appeared to be that there was a disagreement over initially $300, and they stopped talking, which is often what happens and why judges get involved. I had a small claims action, same thing. They were 2 businesswomen. They stopped talking to each other. And by the time they came in, they both realized, oh, I do owe you this and you owe me that. So, and they even they were kind of apologetic about it. And I said, no, I think that's why judges are here. We would prefer that you resolve, but you can't. You come to a neutral magistrate that can discuss the matters with you and try to see if there's a resolution. If not, then based on the law and the facts, make a decision and hand that decision down.
What? Oh, go ahead, Lance.
I was going to ask about the election process. Do you favor electing our judges, or are you in support of appointing our judges?
That's a tough one because, one, I think to keep them neutral, I would probably favor the appointment process. But if you look at the appointment process that goes on in the federal system, it's somewhat concerning because we don't know it's so political. In fact, I was reading an article this morning about Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they were the last two judges on the current in the current law, in modern law, who were confirmed 99-0. That was O'Connor, and 96-3 for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The votes now are like 52-48. So we're not, the way the federal government works it should concern us, because we're only getting political animals into our federal courts. And I don't know if they're following the law that the people want them to follow. And I'm not going to get into what happened a couple of weeks ago, but that's I think a good example where I don't know that we got the truth from those people taking the bench in the appointment process. So that pushes me back the other direction, where in an election, and the way I approach this election, in case this is Mr. White's next question, but the way I approach it is I try to get out the information for them and say, look at this person who's experienced, look at this person who's qualified, look at what this person has done. And I've written a couple articles already. I answered the questions that were posed by the Reno Gazette-Journal to get the information out, because I want the people to learn. I want the people to be informed so they can make the intelligent choice. So that's I sort of gave you a two-part answer there, but I think you both recognize that problem. Should we keep them neutral by appointing them, or is the appointment process just not the best process when we look at how the feds have been handling it?
You talked a little bit about, presenting yourself to the public and with your experience and what you can bring to the department. Can you just talk a little bit about your background and what your experience is?
Sure. So when I started out, became a lawyer in 1992, worked for a short time for other lawyers and myself. And then I met Michael Specchio, the late Michael Specchio. Actually met his brother, and he introduced me to Michael Specchio, and I got a job with the Public Defender's Office. And I was with the Public Defender's Office until 2007, when the county started the alternate Public Defender's Office to deal with conflicts. And I was one of the first attorneys hired on to come aboard that organization. And so that was kind of an exciting thing to help start that department. A couple of years later, I left for private practice. So in 2010, I left for private practice and been in private practice since. I'm still in private practice right now. But during that time, like I said, in the last 5 years, I took on the responsibilities of being available to serve as a judge pro tem. And I've now done it in 4 different courts. And I've also, when this opportunity came for this newly created position, the referee, I applied for that and was hired for that position. So that's my experience in it, and I feel that it shows me headed in that direction of being a judge and having the experience. I would add one more experience that I have. The last 8 years, I have been assigned to the staff for a specialty court known as the Co-occurring Disorder Court and the Young Adult Recovery Court, which is in the Reno Municipal Court. And I've been doing that for 8 years and assisting in a specialty court, which is the only one with that kind of experience.
Great. Actually, I used to work at the Public Defender's Office too. I believe we had a little bit of an overlap there, just full disclosure for everyone too. I worked there from 2005 to 2007, so I do recognize you. It was a while ago, but how do you think that being a public defender and working in that arena, working with the public and then the alternate Public Defender's Office, what do you think, how do you think that will impact and translate into your work on the bench and working with the public?
Well, I think we're starting to learn as a country that there is value in our public defenders. I think that you said it the big way, which is that we work with the public, and I think private lawyers do as well. We work with individuals, we work with people. So right off the bat, when a judge takes the bench and is now working with the litigants in front of them, I think it's valuable to have had that experience where we have worked with those people directly in that manner. In addition, what we see with the most recent Supreme Court justice that got confirmed had public defender experience. So I think we realize that, that there is value in these individuals who have worked this type of job. I think I add to it that, besides the fact that I worked for 2 different departments, I was good enough that they wanted me to come over and help them start another department. And I've been in private practice now for 12 years, which, that's not always easy. Anyone who's worked in private practice knows there's a lot to it. And I think that just shows a responsibility and experience that they can bring to the bench.
Great, thank you.
All right, Cotter, I wanted to address something, and I don't want you to think that I'm playing gotcha or I'm trying to hurt your reputation, but I think it's something that you need to address today. I've heard several people tell me that you are a diehard Steelers fan. How do you want to address that?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know that I am a Steelers fan. I am, and I will tell you that the funny thing is that I grew up on the East Coast, so that's how I became a Steelers fan. That they were very close to the places I lived, and I was a Steelers fan from the 70s on. Still am. I indoctrinated my son, who's now 19 and a Marine, into the Steelers lifestyle, and he is far more in a Pittsburgh Steelers fan than I am. I mean, to the point where I have to, if they're losing, I have to kind of console him. And tell
I appreciate your bravery addressing that, Cotter. I appreciate your bravery coming forward and answering those rumors. Thank you.
I'm not going to deny. I'm not going to deny.
Good. All right, I appreciate that.
Your transparency is appreciated. You were speaking a little bit about what was it? The
co-occurring disorder court.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? That sounds interesting. And
this is a court that was started by a Judge Holmes in the Dorothy Nash Holmes. She started this, and it was it's a mental health court basically. But what the idea was, and what she had saw, and what she had researched and found we needed, was to address people that have a mental health diagnosis and a co-occurring diagnosis of alcohol or drug abuse. Because often what they're doing is they're self-medicating, doing things to make, stop whatever the demons in your mind or whatever's going on. And then from there, they move on to committing crime. So the idea is instead of saying, okay, let's take, for example, a DUI. So you take a DUI and you go, great, here we're going to go ahead and send you to this alcohol class. And as Judge Holmes always says, to teach you to be a better alcoholic. That's what she doesn't like about it. So she says, if that's all we do, are we really addressing the problem? Or do we send them to therapy? Not to alcohol and drug classes, but to therapy, to therapists that are going to address why you're drinking or using drugs. And the idea is at the other side of it, and they have, I think right now that's like an 80 to 85% success rate, which means we've stopped recidivism in those people. These are the numbers she gives, okay? Put that caveat out there. But she does it all the time. She is very proud of that number, that these individuals are not returning to crime because they've now addressed the underlying issue, and they are in a position where they are not having to turn to drugs or alcohol, and they're treating their mental health properly, either through therapy or through the proper medication. So that's where COD, co-occurring disorder, a mental health disorder and a substance abuse disorder.
Great.
Actually, Cotter, I have a follow-up to that, and this might sound a little bit like insider baseball, but I've had some experience as an attorney in some of those specialty courts. And one of my issues with programs is they tend to take the cream of the crop, people who would probably get through it regardless, and they tend to kind of weed out anybody with severe this or severe that. And I know domestic violence for a lot of those programs is almost like an automatic, you're out of the program. And so your numbers are high. Hey, 85% graduate, but most of those, in my opinion, would have graduated anyway. So should you have an opportunity to determine what kinds of people get into those programs, are you going to have an open door policy, or is it going to continue to have those parameters. Because you have to base your success. You have to show people, hey, look, this works, right? You can't do that if you have a 50% failure rate.
That's true. And I will say that, yes, sometimes you will see that kind of selective. We try not to. And that's why there's a staff. So sometimes we'll say, wait, we got to give this person a chance. For example, our doctor is Dr. Lisa Keating. She's the one that, advises us. She is the most likely to say, no, we got to give them a chance. And she'll even sometimes admit, I go, no, this one's going to be a tough one, but this is someone that needs this treatment. So I agree. I think sometimes there is that tendency to go, well, this person's going to be a huge problem. And so we shouldn't bring them in. I don't agree with that. I usually say, hey, we got to, if this person can be helped by the program, shouldn't we bring them into the program? Give them a chance. If they, we certainly help them along, and we do, we have the net under them sometimes because we know that someone who's using drugs is going to relapse sometimes. And we have ways of trying to deal with that, either through sanctions or through changing their therapy to keep working them. So yeah, it does happen. You're going to have some that really bringing them into the program is probably not good. They're just so far gone. But then we try to look at alternatives. Maybe we send them to, the mental health court. Maybe their mental illness is so severe they need the mental health court, or they need like AOT in the family court, somewhere where that they can be addressed. I think in the end, we don't want to send people away. And for the most part, that's not the regular trend. We normally are keeping them. We do have ones that come in and say, I don't want to do it, and we can't force them. So we have that. But I mean, I think for the most part, we really do try. We've had a few we brought in, and within a few weeks they fail out. They're that bad, and that does go on the records.
Thank you. Bit esoteric, so I appreciate you answering that in full. I appreciate that. Thank you.
If there was one thing you would want the public to know and to consider when making a decision whether to vote for you or not, what would that be?
I think the one thing I would want them to do is to research and be informed. And I've talked to a number of voters out there, and I'm always appreciative when they say, I'm trying to learn about you. I'm going to read about you. I go, I want you to, I have nothing to hide. I'm not hiding anything. All right. I am, you can ask me a question, as long as it's about the campaign, but you can ask me a question and I'm going to, tell you. And my position is if you look at my record, if you look at the fact that I have the judicial experience as a judge pro tem and as a court referee, and if you look at the fact that for the last 8 years, I've been been in a specialty court, which is important both for being trauma informed, understanding trauma's impact on crime, and just from having the experience, and because we do have specialty courts in Reno Justice Court, so we want judges to have that experience. If you look at my experience and my qualifications, they far outdo my opponents. And so my advice and what I want them to do is do the research. Read about it. Read about the candidates. Make that decision. There was, like I said, there was a recent article in the Reno Gazette Journal where questions were asked, and I answered them. I looked at the answers of my opponents. I felt that they kind of dodged the questions. And so I actually put out a whole thing a big ad about it saying, look at that. Look at who's answering the questions, because if a judicial candidate can't answer the questions, how can they be a judicial officer?
Great.
Cotter, do you have a website for your campaign, a website for you? Where
I do. I go mostly through my page on Facebook. That's where I'm mostly doing. And then conwayforjudge.com is the website. It's mostly just general information and the opportunity to donate, which is what most people do. And then most of the campaigning is done on sites like Facebook or LinkedIn.
Do you have any other questions, Lance? I think I may have.
I have one last one. Okay, Cotter Conway in his prime, Lance White in his prime, fist fight, who wins? Everybody's been asking me that.
Well, I fight dirty, so I think it's going to be me.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that honest answer.
Is there anything that you think that we didn't cover that you would like, the information out there for people to be fully informed when they go into the voting booth?
I would just ask that they look at what my experience is. I think they're going to find that my experience is I'm the only one with the right experience for the job. And so if you look at that, look at the fact that I've worked as a pro tem judge over the last 4 to 5 years, that I'm currently a part-time court referee, that I've worked in specialty courts, you're going to see that there really is only one candidate, and I would ask for their vote. And so, yeah, that's the opportunity, and I would urge everyone to get out, exercise your right to vote. Not everyone gets that in this world, so it's a great honor to be in a country where you can go to the polls and vote. Because it's a nonpartisan, it is available, it is open to any registered voter. In fact, I actually would like to see the primary open to all registered voters, regardless of what they're voting for. In fact, I've signed petitions before, so I'm a big advocate that we shouldn't disenfranchise anyone, and that even in a primary, even if you're an independent, you should be able to make a decision on the Republican ballots and on the Democrat ballots, on the independent ballots. I think it's America. We should be voting. We should be allowed to vote. If you're registered and you're otherwise eligible, you should vote.
Cotter, I appreciate you not answering every other question with, "I'm just going to be an umpire that calls balls and strikes to every substantive question." I appreciate that. That is rare. And I know in Judicial Election School 101, that's how a lot of people answer every question thrown. So I appreciate you being open with us and really kind of getting into some.
Yeah, well, and that's why I urge you to look at that RGJ article, because that's exactly what you'll see the other candidates do. They almost don't answer the question. I tried to talk about there are only 2 questions, and I tried to give an honest and answer how I would approach the issues presented in those questions.
What were the questions?
So the
perhaps
first
we can give the audience an opportunity.
Absolutely. So the first
now.
question is about the housing crisis, and that if you sit on an eviction, how would you approach the eviction with the idea of the housing crisis and how that has an impact upon our community. The second one was dealing with sentencings and misdemeanors. There's been a lot of deregulation and making it so they're not criminal cases and things like this, and how would you approach that? And I kind of answered the same thing, where I went toward talking about being trauma informed and treating misdemeanors as an opportunity to treat and rehabilitate and not just punish. But those were the 2 questions that were put on the in that article, and all 3 candidates were given the opportunity to answer.